Too often, I hear the phrase, Puella Magi Madoka Magica is a deconstruction of the magical girl genre. Madoka is edgy. Madoka is the first dark magical girl show. Madoka is a more realistic portrayal of the magical girl genre. and these kinds of statements tear me apart because they're misinformed on so many levels. So I want to set the record straight. In order to prevent history from repeating itself, let's try and demystify the misunderstood labyrinth that is deconstruction, Madoka, and the Mahou Shoujo genre. Starting with deconstruction. In 1967, the term deconstruction was coined by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida in his book of Grammatology. In it, Derrida famously states, Il n'y a pas de haut texte, and pardon my terrible French there, but that phrase roughly translates in English to there is no outside text, or there's nothing outside the text. Now, scholars have debated over how to interpret this. Did Derrida mean that there should be absolutely no external comparisons during a deconstructionist reading of a text? Or was he simply being hyperbolic, meaning the text itself should be your primary source for interpreting its meaning? Regardless of your stance, a deconstructionist reading of a text is generally approached as a close reading. When applied to literary theory, deconstructionism is the process of taking apart a text and finding the binary opposites within it. For example, light and dark, or love and hate. You then take apart and examine these seeming contradictions until you ultimately arrive to the conclusion that there is no one true definitive meaning of a word, but rather multiple interpretations of it. For example, in a deconstructionist reading of My Hero Academia, you could look at the dichotomy between heroes and villains within the story and arrive to the conclusion that heroes aren't always heroic and villains aren't necessarily bad. Or in the case of Madoka, you could explore the relationship between magical girls and witches. Within deconstructionism, language is imperfect. Words are messy and ever-evolving. It's about finding nuance. This, of course, is a post-structuralist philosophy that came out in response to structuralism, which brings me to our next very important term. Structuralism. Structuralism, on the other hand, aims to identify pre-established meaning. It seeks to find the broader overarching meaning in interrelationships between texts. For example, the concept of reoccurring tropes like fighting nuns, or plot formulas like the path of the romantic hero, which you may find in popular sci-fi and fantasy such as Harry Potter or Star Wars. Archetypes, tropes, reoccurring plot formulas. These are all structuralist in nature. Therefore, when people are talking about trope deconstruction or genre deconstruction, chances are they're in part using structuralism because they are acknowledging that some sort of broader trend or pattern exists in the first place. Therefore, in discourse about anime or any form of media for that matter, when people are discussing about how a show is a new spin on a genre or a character is reinventing an old trope, instead of deconstruction, I feel a more accurate term to use would be subversion. For instance, you can say that Bisky is a subversion of the old man mentor archetype since she is a cutesy, buff woman in a Lolita dress. You can also argue that revolutionary girl Utena is a subversion of the prince saving a damsel in distress trope, since we have a female character who declares that she wants to become a prince, and the actual prince in the story turns out to be an asshole. Of course, please don't just take my word at face value. Metaphysics is a convoluted subject, and academic scholars themselves argue over how to interpret Derrida. So I encourage you to use critical thinking and to engage with multiple critical texts. Reach your own conclusions. In fact, I strongly recommend checking out Tom Nicholas's channel as a great starting point, since he presents an accessible and comprehensive introduction to various philosophical movements. If you can find some philosophical loophole, an example of a story that actually deconstructs its genre, or a character that deconstructs its trope in the Derridian sense, then well played. Please share your thoughts with me. Heck, I suppose you can even argue that the term deconstruction has been misused to the point that a whole new definition should be added and adopted. You know, kind of like how literally now also means its opposite. Literally. But for all intents and purposes, no, Madoka isn't a Derridian deconstruction of the magical girl genre. Moreover, I also believe that it doesn't necessarily even reinvent or subvert its genre either. Whether it's transformation sequences, supernatural enemies, or having a cute animal sidekick, Madoka has all the basic trappings of a magical girl show. Also, the distinction of Madoka being the first dark magical girl show isn't necessarily an accurate one. It's dismissive of the genre as a whole, since Mahou Shoujo isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Magical girls deal with their own fair share of tragedy and mature themes. Even in Sailor Moon, girls are crucified, characters suffer, and face life or death situations. Yes, Madoka makes a point to explore the psychological ramifications of trauma. However, simply chalking Madoka up as a show about sad magical girls dying, that sounds like something Sayaka might say before she turned into a witch. This is precisely the pessimism that Madoka is trying to reject. In the face of hopelessness, Madoka overcomes the cycle of despair, rewrites the laws of causality and the universe, so that she can leave us with a message of hope. And that part is worth remembering.